A missing letter hides a deadly truth waiting to be uncovered. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. I'm glad you're here. Let's begin. If you want to understand the sanctity of a household, don't look at its wallpaper or its silver. Look at what makes the owner bristle. In our house, the things that made him bristle were A. Orchids, B. Beer, C. Interruptions, in that order, and D. Me. When I came at him from the wrong angle, with the wrong news. The orchids were upstairs behind glass, and the beer was downstairs in the refrigerator, and both of them were safer than most bank vaults because the boss took personal offense at the concept of disorder. The interruptions were where I came in. It was a Tuesday with the kind of January chill that makes Manhattan feel like it's wearing a damp overcoat. I was at my desk in the front room of the brownstone, our office, my cage, our stage, working through a stack of mail that had as much charm as a box of nails. When you're in my line of work, half your correspondence is either begging, threatening, or suggesting that you help somebody do something they shouldn't be doing. The other half is bills. Fritz had just passed through with the afternoon tray, and the boss, ensconced in his red leather chair like a monument to immobility, had looked up long enough to take possession of his cup and return to his book. The only sound after that was the soft tick of the clock and the faint, comforting awareness of a man who could detect a lie the way a bloodhound detects a ham. The bell rang. It wasn't the usual ring. Most people press the button like they're daring you to ignore them. This was a cautious tap, like a person who had been told the rules and was trying not to break them before they were even in sight. I got up because in our arrangement I'm the one who does locomotion, and I went to the door. The woman on the stoop didn't look like she belonged to the category of citizen who rings cautious bells. She was dressed well, not loudly, in a dark coat that had the kind of cut you pay for because you don't want anyone to notice you paid for it. Her hair was pulled back tight enough to tell you she had opinions about control, and her face, pale with the cold, had an expression that hovered between annoyance and fear, like she hadn't decided which one would win. She said, "Mr. Goodwin." I opened the door wider. "I've been called worse. Come in." She stepped inside with a quick glance around, as if expecting the walls to register her presence and file a complaint. Her eyes touched the banister, the umbrella stand, the framed print in the hall, and then returned to me. That glance told me she had been in fine houses before and had learned to evaluate them the way a card player evaluates a table. "Mr. Wolfe is in?" she asked. "He's always in," I said. "He just doesn't always admit it." "Name?" There was the tiniest hesitation, as if giving her name was a concession. Then, "Clara Vane." I paused half a beat. The name had a faint bell tinkle quality, like it might have been printed on programs or in a society column. Not famous enough to be a headline, but familiar enough to be recognized by people who recognize things. I led her into the office. The boss didn't get up because the boss doesn't. He tilted his head a fraction and regarded her as if she were an exhibit brought into a museum without proper paperwork. She took one step into the room and stopped, as if her shoes had encountered an invisible line. Outsiders often had that reaction. The brownstone had a way of making you aware you were a guest. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, in a voice that tried for calm and didn't quite reach it. "Madam," Wolfe replied. The word had weight. He didn't say please or do sit the way a lesser host might. He simply indicated the chair facing his with a small motion of his hand, as if seating was a matter of physics, not courtesy. She sat, not gingerly, she wasn't that sort, more as if she had decided it was strategic to sit. Wolfe's eyes stayed on her. My job, at that point, was to be quiet and watch for the places where her story would snag. "What brings you here?" Wolfe asked. She held his gaze, then looked at me for a second, as if remembering I existed. Her fingers tightened on her handbag. I was told you handle delicate matters. Wolfe's mouth compressed. I handle matters. Delicacy is often an affectation. Her lips pressed together, then released. Then I will be direct. A letter has been taken from me. Letters are taken every day, Wolfe said. The postal service is evidence. This one, she said, was not mailed. It was in my possession. It was hidden. That made his eyes narrow a degree, like a camera adjusting to focus. Hidden things interest men like Wolfe. They imply intention. Hidden where? He asked. In my home, she said. In a place no one should have known. Wolfe lifted his cup, sipped, and set it down without sound. And yet someone did. Yes. You have come to ask me to retrieve it, Wolfe said. She inhaled, and the breath looked like it hurt. Yes. Why? Her eyes flicked away to the side. Just a moment. That wasn't guilt, not necessarily. That was calculation. It contains information, she said carefully, that could be used against me. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. Madame, you describe most private correspondence. Her jaw tightened. Not like this. Wolfe waited. The waiting was one of his talents. People mistake silence for lack of engagement. With him it was a lever. She shifted in the chair. It is a letter written 20 years ago. That is an odd age for a crisis, I said, because when the boss goes silent, my mouth tends to do the work. She gave me a cool glance. It is odd only until you understand what has changed. And what has changed? Wolfe asked. I'm about to be appointed to a position, she said. Wolfe's expression didn't change. He didn't care about positions except those involving orchids, but he cared about motive. What position? He asked. She hesitated again and then, perhaps deciding that half-truths would be punished, said, a trusteeship of a foundation. That was vague enough to be technically informative and practically useless. But her voice trembled a little on the word foundation, as if the institution had teeth. Wolfe said, You are concerned that this letter will be revealed and will cause you embarrassment. Not embarrassment, she said sharply. Ruin, it would destroy. She stopped. Her throat worked. It would invalidate the appointment, and it would stain people who do not deserve it. That's the line people use when they want you to think they're being noble. Sometimes they are. Usually they're not. They just know nobility plays well in certain rooms. Wolfe's fingers touched together, tip to tip. Is this letter incriminating? It is. Compromising, she said. I filed that under word chosen for a reason. Wolfe's eyes remained steady. Who knew of its existence? No one, she said quickly. Madam, Wolfe said, and there was a mild rebuke in it, like a man correcting a waiter who has brought the wrong wine. Someone has taken it, therefore someone knew. Her cheeks colored. I mean, no one was told. It was not shared. It was kept. By you, Wolfe said. Yes. Then we must consider, Wolfe said, how it could have been discovered without being told. If you had been burgled, you would have said so. If your home had been ransacked, your coat would show it in your nerves. That was one of his tricks, announcing your emotional state as if it were a piece of furniture. It unsettles people. It also makes you feel seen. Her eyes widened slightly. There was no break-in? Then, Wolfe said, someone with access. She swallowed. I have staff. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Names. She opened her handbag and removed a small notebook. Neat, black, expensive. My housekeeper, Mrs. Heller. She has been with me for 8 years. A young man who comes twice a week for maintenance, for small repairs. His name is Rowan, and a secretary, part-time, for correspondence. Miriam Sloane. Wolfe nodded once. He looked at me. That meant, note it, remember it, investigate it. Then he returned to her. Where was the letter hidden? Her fingers tightened around the notebook. "In a box in the back of my linen closet, behind folded bedding." Wolfe's voice was dry. "A linen closet is not a vault." "It was," she said, "in a false bottom." That made my eyebrows rise. Wolfe's did not, but I could see the interest flare in his eyes like a match struck under glass. "A false bottom," Wolfe repeated. "Yes," she said. "It is a box my mother gave me. The bottom lifts out if you press the corner." She took a breath. "No one knows that. No one should. It was childish." "It was prudent," Wolfe corrected. "When did you last see the letter?" "Saturday," she said. "I checked it. She stopped again, and I could practically see her revising her phrasing. "I assured myself it was there." "And you discovered it missing?" Wolfe asked. "Yesterday," she said. "Monday evening. I went to—" She stopped. "I went to look." Wolfe's eyes narrowed a hair. "Why did you go to look?" She had the grace to blush. "Because I received a call." From where I stood, that was the first real thing she'd said. "A call," Wolfe said. "From whom?" "I don't know," she said. The voice was disguised. I made a small sound. In New York, disguising your voice usually means either you're a teenager pranking your teacher or you're trying too hard. She ignored me. "It was a man. He said, the past is not as buried as you think." And then he quoted a line from the letter. Wolfe's face remained composed, but the air in the room tightened. Quoting a line meant proof. It meant the caller had the letter, or wanted her to believe he did. "What line?" Wolfe asked. Her eyes dropped. "I would rather not repeat it." Wolfe's voice cooled. "Madame, you have come here to ask for my services. You will not do so on your terms alone." She looked up, startled, as if she had expected him to accept secrecy as a courtesy. Then she said quietly, "It was a sentence about a promise made to someone I should not have been speaking to." I watched Wolfe. He was assembling a picture in his head, and the pieces were not yet enough. "What did the caller want?" Wolfe asked. "He said," she replied, "that if I wished the letter to remain private, I would withdraw from consideration for the trusteeship." Ah, there it was. Not blackmail for money, blackmail for power. That's the kind that gets people killed, or worse, respectable. Wolfe said, "And you refused." Her chin lifted. I did not agree. "Did you say anything that could identify you?" Wolfe asked. "It was my phone," she said almost bitterly. "He had already identified me." Wolfe's eyes remained on her. "Why come to me?" She hesitated, and then the truth slipped out because it was the only truth that fit. "Because the foundation—" She stopped, glanced at me, then back to Wolfe. "Because there are people involved who cannot be approached. They are powerful. They have influence. If I go to the police, they will do nothing. I finished for her, because I've watched that movie and I never like the ending." Wolfe said, "The police do not retrieve letters. They prosecute crimes. Do you wish prosecution?" Her mouth tightened. "I wish the letter returned. And I wish the person who took it prevented from using it." Wolfe nodded. "Prevention," he murmured, as if tasting the word. "A civil desire, often futile." She leaned forward a fraction. "Mr. Wolfe, I can pay." His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "That is not the difficulty." I knew what the difficulty was going to be before he said it. The boss has a relationship with his home that's practically spiritual. If this case had anything to do with the brownstone being invaded, physically or symbolically, it would interest him. If it didn't, she could offer him the crown jewels, and he'd still say no if it interfered with his orchid hours. Wolfe said, "Why should I involve myself in your private disgrace?" Her eyes widened with anger. "It is not disgrace." "Then you should be pleased to have it revealed," Wolfe said calmly. "If it is not disgrace, it is harmless." She stared at him. I could see her fight the urge to stand up and march out. She was not accustomed to being talked to like an ordinary person. Wolfe talks to everyone the same way, as an ordinary person who is either truthful or not. Finally, she said, "It is unjust." Wolfe's gaze sharpened again. "Explain." She drew a slow breath. "The letter is from a man who is dead. It was written when I was young and foolish. It contains affection, and it contains a confession." Wolfe's voice stayed even. "A confession of what?" Her eyes held his, and for the first time there was something raw there. "Of something I did not do." That got me. It got him too, though he didn't show it the way I did, with an eyebrow and a shift of weight. "A false confession," Wolfe said. "Yes," she whispered. "I wrote it for him. He asked me to. He said it would protect someone else. He said it was necessary, and I—" Her fingers clenched. "I did it. I was 22. I thought I was saving a life. I thought it would disappear. It did. Until now." Wolfe leaned back a fraction in his chair. It wasn't movement so much as a reallocation of mass. "Madame," he said, "you come with a paradox. You are threatened with exposure by a document that declares you guilty of an act you claim you did not commit." "Yes," she said quickly. "And if it is made public, no one will care what I claim. They will read it and they will believe it, because they will want to." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "What act?" She shook her head. "I can't." Wolfe's tone turned firm, not loud. "You can." She stared at him, and I could see she was measuring the room. Me, Wolfe, the door. The furniture, as if calculating her chances of retreat. Then she said very softly, "It concerns a death." The air in the office changed. The word death does that, even when you've been around it. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Then your matter may not be merely civil." She swallowed. "It was ruled an accident." Wolfe's eyes held her. "Ruled?" "Yes, and the letter suggests otherwise." She closed her eyes briefly. "It suggests culpability. My culpability." Wolfe sat silent for a beat. Then he said, "If you did not do it, why did you write such a letter?" Her eyes opened and they were wet now, though she wasn't crying. "Because I was asked to. Because I believed him. Because I was in love." Wolfe made a small sound in the back of his throat, half disdain, half recognition. Wolfe is not sentimental, but he is not ignorant of human folly. He collects it the way he collects facts. He turned his head slightly toward me. "Archie." "Yes." "Miss Vane will tell us," Wolfe said. "The name of the deceased man, the name of the man who induced her to write the letter, and the nature of the death. She will do so because otherwise she wastes my time." Clara Vane looked at me as if I was going to intervene, like a mediator between her and an immovable judge. I gave her my best sympathetic shrug. "He's not kidding," I said. "He doesn't even warm up until you've told him something you didn't want to tell him." Her lips tightened. Then, as if surrendering a piece of herself, she said, "The deceased was Evelyn Kestrel." That name did ring a bell, louder this time. I'd seen it before. Not recently, but in that part of the memory cabinet labeled Society Tragedies. Pretty young woman, money, something about a fall, a lake house, a headline that lasted a week. Wolfe's gaze stayed on her. "And the man?" Clara Vane's voice lowered. "Jonas Rook. If you want to see a man like Wolfe react, don't wait for a gasp. Wait for the infinitesimal tightening around the eyes, as if a mental file drawer has just slid open." I didn't know Jonas Rook personally, but the name belonged to a certain category, men who have never been convicted of anything and have nevertheless left fingerprints on the lives of others. Wolfe said, "Proceed." Clara Vane sat very still. "Evelyn Kestrel died at a house on the Hudson. She fell from a terrace into the river. The police said it was an accident. Jonas Rook said it was not. He said someone wanted her dead. He said—" Her voice shook. "He said if I wrote the letter, it would draw attention away from the person responsible." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "You believed him?" "I did," she said. "And now someone has that letter and wants to use it to destroy me." Wolfe's eyes didn't leave her face. "Or to protect someone else," he murmured. Clara Vane blinked. "What?" Wolfe's mouth curved slightly, not with humor but with thought. "Blackmail is rarely solitary. It is a method. Often it is employed in service of a larger purpose. I watched him. He was interested now. Not just interested, engaged." He turned to me. "Archie, you will obtain everything available about Evelyn Kestrel's death and about Jonas Rook. You will do so today." "Sure," I said. "I'll just step outside and ask the city to hand me its secrets." Wolfe ignored that. He addressed Clara Vane. "Madame, I will consider your request." She leaned forward, hope flashing. "You will take the case?" Wolfe lifted a hand slightly as if restraining a dog. "Do not presume. I will consider. There is a question I must ask." She held her breath. Wolfe said, "How do you know the letter was taken from your home and not from here?" She stared. "From here?" Wolfe's eyes were steady. "You have not yet told me the most important thing, why you believed it was safe at your home and why you checked it on Saturday. You checked it because you suspected it might be endangered. That suspicion did not begin with the call you received yesterday. It began earlier." She swallowed. And," Wolfe continued, "you arrived at my door with a caution in your manner that suggests you have been watched, perhaps followed." Clara Vane's face went paler. "That's impossible." Wolfe's voice remained calm. "Nothing is impossible, madam. It is merely improbable until it occurs." I felt a small prickle on the back of my neck. That's the trouble with Wolfe when he's on. He makes your skin feel like it's part of his instrumentation. Clara Vane looked at the door, then back at Wolfe. I thought I saw someone outside my building on Saturday," she admitted. "A man. He was there again on Sunday." Wolfe nodded once. "So you checked the letter?" "Yes." "And you did not move it," Wolfe said. "No," she whispered. "I thought if I moved it, they would know." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. They already knew. Clara Vane's hands were clenched now on her handbag, white-knuckled. "Please, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe sat silent for a long moment. In that pause, I could hear the clock ticking and the faint hum of the house itself, like a living thing tolerating the presence of strangers. Finally, Wolfe said, "I will accept your case on one condition." Her eyes widened. "Name it." Wolfe's voice was soft, and that was worse than when it was loud. "Your letter, or what remains of it, must be brought into this house." She stared. "But it's been taken." Wolfe's gaze held hers. "Then the person who has taken it must be induced to bring it here." A cold little thrill ran through me. That was Wolfe's favorite game. Make the enemy come to you, then close the door. Clara Vane's voice was barely audible. "How?" Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, and his mouth made that faint curve again. "That," he said, "is why you have come to me." And just like that, without getting out of his chair, he had turned a missing letter into a threat against the brownstone. Because if someone was bold enough to stalk a woman over an old confession, they were bold enough to step inside our world. Wolfe doesn't like bold. He likes control. And if there's one thing I've learned in that house, it's that when the boss decides something has to happen under his roof, it will happen, whether the city likes it or not. Wolfe's condition hung in the air like cigar smoke you couldn't see but could definitely taste. Clara Vane sat frozen for a second, as if she'd expected the answer to be either a yes with a fee or a no with a door. Instead, she'd gotten an if, Wolfe's favorite shape of answer. along with the uncomfortable implication that the safest place for a stolen, explosive piece of paper was the one place in New York where nothing was supposed to be stolen at all. "You're asking me," she said carefully, "to lure him here." "I'm not asking," Wolfe replied. "I'm stating necessity." "And if he refuses?" Wolfe's eyelids lowered a fraction. "Then we employ a different necessity." I cleared my throat because the temperature in the room had dropped a few degrees, and I didn't want Clara Vane to bolt before we got the first real foothold. "Let's start smaller," I said. "You said the caller quoted a line. That's leverage. He wants you to withdraw. If you don't, he'll escalate. That means he'll contact you again. Odds are he'll want proof you're complying. That gives us a hook." Clara looked at me as if I'd said something indecent but practical. "You want me to pretend I'm going to withdraw?" Wolfe's eyes went to me, approvingly neutral. I'd been with him long enough to know that was applause. Clara's voice sharpened. "That would be lying." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Madam, you're already entangled in a false confession. Your scruples are late." Her cheeks colored, but she didn't deny it. "What exactly do you propose?" Wolfe didn't answer right away. He turned his head slightly. "Fritz!" The kitchen door opened quietly, and Fritz appeared, a broad, calm man in a white apron who could have served a king or run a monastery. He looked at Clara with polite interest and at Wolfe with the attentive patience of a man waiting for a weather report. "Ja, Herr Wolfe." "Please bring coffee for Miss Vane," Wolfe said, "and inform Mr. Kramer that I would like to speak with him. You may tell him it concerns an old death returning to nuisance." Fritz's eyebrows lifted just enough to register surprise. Then he nodded and vanished, the way Fritz can, as if the house absorbs him. Clara Vane stared. "You're calling the police?" "I am," Wolfe said, "making them aware that I am engaged." "There is a difference." She looked unsettled. "But if it becomes public—" Wolfe cut it off with a small motion. "You came because you cannot approach certain persons. I have no such inhibition. Moreover, I will not invite a threat into my home without notifying those whose duty it is to respond if the threat becomes physical." That was Wolfe being both arrogant and prudent at the same time, which is his sweet spot. He turned his attention back to her. "You will, when next contacted, express willingness to withdraw. Not immediate willingness, reluctant willingness. You will request assurance that the letter will be returned upon your compliance." Clara's fingers tightened on her handbag again. "And if he asks how I'll withdraw?" "The foundation isn't a club membership. There are procedures." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "And procedures generate documents. Documents generate opportunities." I leaned forward on my chair. "Do you have a meeting scheduled?" I asked. "A call? Anything with the foundation that's soon." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow afternoon, a private dinner with 3 members of the selection committee." "Names," Wolfe said. Clara's eyes flicked, calculating again. Then she decided she had already surrendered too much to stop. "Marjorie Pell, Dr. Sandeep Kulkarni, and Philip Arnett." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly at the list, as if those names were chess pieces he could already see moving. I said, "And this Jonas Rook, what is he to them?" Clara's mouth tightened. "Nothing, officially." Wolfe's gaze held hers. "Unofficially?" Clara drew a breath. "Rook is adjacent. He makes introductions. He funds events. He knows where reputations are stored and how to crack the locks." Wolfe nodded once. "A broker?" "Yes," she said bitterly. "A broker." Fritz returned with coffee for Clara and set the cup down with a small nod. Then he came to my desk, leaned in slightly and murmured, "Inspector Kramer will come when he is finished with his meeting." He did not sound happy. "He rarely does," I murmured back. Clara took a sip of coffee like it was medication. "You're going to involve this Inspector Kramer without even knowing what happened to Evelyn Kestrel?" Wolfe's eyes remained steady. "We know what happened to her. She died." "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant," Wolfe said. "Madam, you are frightened of attention. You should be more frightened of ignorance. When fear is warranted, one must choose the form of it." Clara stared at him, and for a second I thought she might break. Then she set the coffee down carefully, as if clinging to precision. "All right," she said. "I will. Say what you want me to say. But I need to understand the purpose. Why bring the letter here?" Wolfe's voice softened, just a shade. "Because whoever possesses it believes it is power. Power is most easily examined when it is brought into proximity with greater power. In this house, madam, I am that. There are moments when a man's ego is so naked you want to throw him a towel. That was one of them, but in Wolfe's case it was also true in a way I'd learned not to argue with. The doorbell rang again. I frowned. 2 interruptions in 1 hour is enough to make Wolfe start writing letters to God. I got up and went to answer. On the stoop was a young man in a messenger jacket, cap pulled low. He didn't look like a real messenger. He looked like someone dressed as one, which in New York means he was either auditioning or lying. "Delivery?" he said, holding out a flat envelope. "For who?" I asked. He shrugged, like shrugging was his only language. "Address says here." I took the envelope. "No return address?" "No logo. Just our street number and Mr. Archie Goodwin in block letters that were trying too hard to look casual." "Wait," I said, but he was already moving, quick steps down the stoop and into the street. I went to the door and watched him merge into foot traffic, not running, not looking back, just dissolving into the city like he'd been poured there. I shut the door and stood for a second with the envelope in my hand. I'd handled plenty of threatening messages in my life, but this one had a special flavor. It knew my name. Back in the office, Wolfe's eyes were on the envelope before I reached my desk. He hadn't moved, of course, but he had a way of noticing motion in his territory, like a cat noticing a mouse. "An unsolicited gift," I said, and held it up. "From whom?" Clara asked, and her voice had tightened. "I'll let you know when I get the fun part," I said. I slid a letter opener under the flap carefully, because I like my fingers attached to my hands, and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. No letterhead, no signature. It contained one line. "You have invited her into a dangerous house." That was it. No punctuation beyond the period. The handwriting was the same block style as the address. Clara's face went white so fast it was like someone had turned down her color. Wolfe held out his hand, palm up. I brought the paper to him. He read it without changing expression, then looked up at me. "They know," Clara whispered. "Yes," I said, because pretending otherwise would have been insulting. Wolfe's voice was calm, almost placid. "They are attempting to control the venue," he said. "That is encouraging." "Encouraging?" I echoed. "Yes," Wolfe said. "It suggests they fear it." Clara's hands were shaking now, and she tried to still them by clasping them together. "I shouldn't have come." Wolfe's eyes fixed on her. "Madame, you came. Now we proceed." He turned his gaze to me. "Archie, you will go to Miss Vane's residence immediately. You will examine the box, the closet, the environs, and you will interview her staff. You will do so with discretion and with the assumption that at least one of those persons is either complicit or coerced." I opened my mouth to make a joke, because jokes are my reflex when things get sharp, but the note on the desk robbed it of oxygen. "Sure," I said instead. "Any particular order?" Wolfe's eyes lowered to the message again. "First," he said, "you will determine how they learned she was here. That knowledge will tell us whether we are dealing with surveillance, betrayal, or both." I glanced at Clara. "Did anyone know you were coming here?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. No, I left alone. I didn't tell anyone. Her voice snagged. I called a cab. I paid cash. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And yet they know. I felt the back of my neck prickle again. The brownstone didn't like being observed. I didn't like it either. From the hall came the sound of another bell. This one, the telephone, not the front door. Fritz's voice was low in the corridor. Then he appeared at the office doorway. Herr Wolfe, he said. Inspector Kramer is here. Wolfe didn't move, but the atmosphere in the room shifted into that special state it gets when law enforcement is about to collide with Wolfe's certainty. Show him in, Wolfe said. And as Fritz stepped back to usher in the inspector, I looked down at the anonymous note on Wolfe's desk and had the distinct, unpleasant sense that the case had just done what Wolfe claimed it would do, walked itself right into our house. Only it hadn't come alone. Inspector Kramer came in wearing his coat like an argument he hadn't finished yet. He took in Clara Vane, the note on Wolfe's desk, and me standing halfway between my chair and the door, and his mouth flattened into a line that suggested he was already tired of all of us. All right, he said. Which one of you is dead, disappeared, or lying to me? Good afternoon, Inspector, Wolfe said pleasantly. You are early. Kramer snorted. When you tell a man there's an old death returning to nuisance, he doesn't wait for an invitation. His eyes flicked to Clara. Who's the lady? Miss Clara Vane, Wolfe said. She is threatened. Kramer's gaze sharpened. Threatened how? I picked up the anonymous note and held it out. Like this. Kramer took it, read it, and let out a short breath through his nose. Cute. Recent, Wolfe corrected. Delivered moments ago. Kramer looked at him. You think it's connected to the Kestrel case? I am certain it is connected to Miss Vane, Wolfe replied. The Kestrel case is the instrument. Kramer turned to Clara. You want to explain why my desk hasn't seen you before today? Clara stiffened. Because until yesterday I believed it was over. Kramer gave her a look that had melted stronger spines than hers, but she held. People don't threaten trustees over nothing, he said. No, Wolfe agreed. They threaten trustees over leverage. Kramer sighed and handed the note back to me. All right, officially, the Kestrel death was an accident. Unofficially, it was thin. Unwitnessed fall, money in the room, and a boyfriend with enemies. He glanced at Wolfe. You've got something new? Yes, Wolfe said. Someone has stolen a letter written by Miss Vane 20 years ago. The letter contains a false confession to culpability in that death. Kramer stared. False confession? Yes. Kramer turned back to Clara. Is that true? She nodded. Once. Yes. Kramer rubbed his face. Jesus. He looked at Wolfe. You're sure this isn't a late attempt to rewrite history? Wolfe's voice stayed level. The blackmailer's demand is withdrawal from a foundation trusteeship. That is not history. It is strategy. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Who benefits if she withdraws? An excellent question, Wolfe said. One that will be answered. Kramer looked at me. And what are you doing? I'm about to go look at a linen closet, I said. Kramer grimaced. You always start at the strangest places. They're often the most honest, Wolfe said. Kramer hesitated, then nodded. All right, I'll open a quiet file. No noise unless it gets loud. He looked at Clara. You don't leave town. I won't, she said. Kramer paused at the door and looked back at Wolfe. If this blows up, it will be contained, Wolfe said. Kramer gave a humorless smile. That's what you always say. Then he was gone, coat swaying like punctuation. The room settled again, but it was a tense quiet now. Wolfe turned to Clara. You will proceed with your dinner tomorrow as planned. You will make no announcement. You will wait. She nodded, subdued. Wolfe looked at me. Archie. I'm already moving, I said. Clara's building was on the Upper West Side, the kind of quiet money address that prides itself on discretion and has doormen trained to forget faces. I got past the desk with my name and a polite nod, and went up in the elevator alone, listening to the soft mechanical hum and thinking about who might have been listening to us earlier. Her apartment smelled faintly of lemon polish and restraint. The housekeeper, Mrs. Heller, was a compact woman with tired eyes and hands that had folded other people's lives into neat stacks for decades. She answered my questions carefully, too carefully, like someone afraid of stepping on the wrong word. "No strangers," she said. "No visitors without notice." "What about maintenance?" I asked. "The boy comes Wednesdays," she said. "Rowan." "And Saturday?" She frowned. "No. He doesn't come Saturdays." "Did he ever?" I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction. "Once, a month ago, there was a leak." I made a note of that. The linen closet was neat to the point of aggression. I found the box easily enough. A lacquered thing with flowers painted on the lid. The false bottom released just as Clara had said, with pressure in the corner. Empty now. Clean. No scuffs. No damage. Whoever took the letter had known exactly how to do it, or had practiced. I looked at the bedding behind it. No disturbance. That told me something. This wasn't a hurried theft. It was surgical. The secretary, Miriam Sloane, arrived while I was there. Young, sharp-eyed, with a kind of nervous energy that comes from ambition. She said she typed letters, ran errands, and didn't touch personal things. "Did you know about the box?" I asked. She shook her head too fast. "No." "Did you know about Evelyn Kestrel?" I asked casually. Her eyes flickered. "Everyone knows that story." "Do they?" I asked. She didn't answer. Rowan was harder to find. His phone went to voicemail, and his maintenance company said he was between assignments. That's company talk for don't ask us. I stepped out onto the street and stood there a moment, letting the city move around me. Somewhere in that motion was a man who dressed like a messenger and knew where I lived. Somewhere else was a letter that shouldn't exist. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered. "Goodwin." A distorted voice came back, electronically flattened. "You are persistent?" "That's what they tell me," I said. "You should advise Miss Vane," the voice said, "that patience is not protection." "Funny," I said. "I was about to advise you the same thing." A pause. Then, "You think you are safe?" "I think you called the wrong number," I said, and hung up. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened without interruption as I reported. When I finished, he closed his eyes for a moment, not resting, thinking. "They know your movements," he said, "but not your conclusions." "That's something," I said. "Yes," Wolfe replied. "It is everything." He opened his eyes. "Tomorrow, Archie, you will invite Mr. Rowan to come here." I blinked. "Invite?" "Yes." "And if he declines?" Wolfe's mouth curved slightly. "Then he will confirm himself." I looked at the stairs, at the door, at the walls that had stood through worse than this. "You really think they'll bring the letter here?" "They have already brought their attention," Wolfe said. "The letter will follow." He reached for his book again, as if this were merely an intermission before dinner. I went back to my desk, the phone heavy in my pocket, and wrote Rowan's name at the top of a fresh page. Somewhere between a linen closet and a false confession, the past had decided it wasn't done with us yet. And if there's one thing I know about the past, it never comes alone, and it never knocks politely. Getting Rowan to come to the brownstone sounded easy in Wolfe's mouth, the way remove a stain sounds easy right before you ruin your shirt. The trouble with men who fix leaks and patch plaster is that they spend their lives dodging responsibility. They learn early that if you admit you were near something when it broke, you're buying it. Still, Wolfe had given the order, which meant the job was to make the universe cooperate. I started with the simple route. I called the maintenance company again and asked for Rowan. This time, I used a tone that suggested money, trouble, or both. The receptionist transferred me to a supervisor who sounded like he ate lawsuits for breakfast. "Rowan's an independent contractor," he said. "We don't control his schedule." "That's a comforting phrase," I told him. "Tell him Archie Goodwin wants a word. He can call me here." "No," the supervisor said. "If you've got a complaint—" "I've got an opportunity," I cut in. "Paid. Cash. Today." There was a pause, the kind you can hear through a phone line. "He'll call," the supervisor said finally, and hung up like he'd just done me a favor. I relayed that to Wolfe. He didn't react beyond a small blink, which in Wolfe terms was a shrug. "You will also," Wolfe said, "consider the messenger." "Already did," I said. "He's either a real messenger with ambitions or an ambitious somebody with a messenger jacket. Either way, I didn't get a license plate because Manhattan doesn't do license plates. It does ankles." Wolfe's eyes stayed on me. "Did you notice the doorman at Miss Vane's building?" "Sure," I said. "He noticed me too, which is his job." "And did he notice Miss Vane leaving yesterday?" I frowned. "Probably. He'd have noticed a penguin in a tutu." Wolfe's fingers touched. "Then the simplest hypothesis is that someone obtained information from the building. Money. Pressure. A favor. Or Miriam Sloane," I said. The secretary had that twitchy look. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "Perhaps. But the note was delivered here within an hour of Miss Vane's arrival. That suggests either direct surveillance or immediate notification. A building staff member would require time to communicate. Surveillance requires only eyes." I pictured the street outside the brownstone, the steady flow of pedestrians, the parked cars, the delivery trucks, the casual faces. I didn't like it. "Fine," I said. "We're being watched." Wolfe's tone stayed mild. "We are always watched, Archie. Usually by fools." That afternoon, I did what I always do when the boss says, "invite," and the universe says, "no." I went out and pushed. I walked the blocks around the brownstone twice, not in circles like a lost tourist, but with purpose, letting my reflection catch in shop windows and watching for the same face, twice. I spotted 3 candidates, a man pretending to read a paper he wasn't reading, a woman lingering too long at a bus stop with no bus due, and a kid in a knit cap who looked like he'd been born suspicious. Any one of them could have been watching us, or none of them. In New York, paranoia is often just accurate observation with anxiety. Back inside, Fritz served lunch with the calm of a man refusing to be drafted into any drama that might interfere with digestion. Wolfe ate, drank his beer, and treated the case like an intellectual exercise that might or might not be worth his time. Except I could tell it was worth his time, because he asked Fritz, very casually, whether any deliveries had arrived that morning besides the messenger envelope. "No, Herr Wolfe," Fritz said. "Good," Wolfe replied, and I knew he had expected the opposite. At 2:30 the phone rang. I answered, listened for a half-second, and said, "Rowan." A male voice came back, young, controlled. "Who is this?" "I'm the man who can pay you for your time," I said. "And also the man who can make your life complicated if you ignore me. Archie Goodwin." Silence. "You were at Clara Vane's apartment," I said. "I do maintenance," he replied. His voice was careful, as if each word had to pass inspection before it left his mouth. "Sure," I said. "And last time you were there, something went missing. I want to talk about that." "I didn't take anything," he said quickly. "That may be true," I said. "It may also be irrelevant. Here's the part that matters. You know something, either about the box, the closet, the staff, Or the person who asked you to be there when you weren't scheduled? Another pause. Longer. I was there Wednesday, he said. Which Wednesday? I asked. The one I was scheduled, he snapped, then softened as if remembering that snapping at me wasn't a safe habit. Look, I don't know what you think. I think you're nervous for a reason, I said. Come to my office. You'll be paid for your time. You'll also be safer talking in front of my employer than you will talking wherever you are now. He gave a short laugh without humor. Your employer? Who's that? A gangster? Something like that, I said. Nero Wolfe. The name landed. I could hear it in his breathing. I'm not going to your office, he said. All right, I said. Then we do this another way. You tell me where you are, and I come to you. No, he said immediately. That was confirmation dressed as refusal. Someone scared him, possibly more than Wolfe scared him, which took talent. Rowan, I said, you're already involved. You don't get to choose that. You only get to choose whether you're a pawn or a witness. Silence again. Then low. They told me not to talk. There it is, I said. Who's they? He inhaled sharply. I can't. You can, I said, keeping my voice calm. Because if you don't, they'll use you, then drop you, and you'll be left holding a bag you don't even understand. His voice tightened. I didn't do anything. Then come here, I said. If you're clean, the brownstone is safer than your apartment, your workplace, or wherever you're hiding. We have coffee. We have walls. We have a man who doesn't blink when threatened. He didn't answer. I took a gamble. They asked you to do a small thing, I said. To look in a closet, to check a box, to report whether something was still there. You didn't think it mattered. Now it matters. His breath came out in a shaky exhale. How do you know that? I'm guessing, I said, but I'm good at it. He swallowed audibly. If I come, I want protection. Wolfe doesn't do protection, I said. He does leverage. It's better. Another beat. Today? Yes, I said. Now, before your courage evaporates. All right, he said, and the word sounded like it hurt him. I'll come. Good, I said. Front door. Ring once. And if you see anyone you recognize between wherever you are and here, you turn around and call me back. Understand? Yes. He hung up. I brought the news to Wolfe. He received it as if I'd told him the weather had shifted, which in his world is about the same level of interest unless it affects orchids. He will not arrive alone, Wolfe said. Because he'll be followed? I asked. Because, Wolfe replied, he is now a conduit. Those who threaten Miss Vane will wish to know what he reveals. I looked toward the front windows and felt the city press against the glass. So we let them follow him right to our door. Wolfe's eyes were steady. We will know more about them by seeing how they behave when they believe they are unseen. I went to the front room and waited, not by the window like an amateur, but at my desk where I could watch the hall mirror catch reflections. Fritz moved quietly in the background, his expression polite and untroubled in that maddening way he has when the rest of us are trying to measure danger by the inch. The bell rang. Once. I opened the door. Rowan stood on the stoop with his shoulders slightly hunched, as if bracing for impact. He was younger than I'd imagined, early 20s, with a narrow face and a faint, bruise-yellow shadow on his cheekbone that looked like it had once been purple. His eyes flicked past me to the street, then back. Come in, I said. He stepped inside quickly, and I shut the door behind him with more satisfaction than was probably healthy. In the office, Wolfe regarded him as he'd regarded Clara Vane, silently, weighing. Rowan stood in front of my desk and didn't sit, even when I nodded at the chair. Sitting would have been an admission that he intended to stay. Wolfe said, Mr. Rowan. Rowan's eyes widened slightly at being named like that. Formal, as if he'd been promoted into seriousness. "Yeah, you are afraid," Wolfe observed. "That is sensible. Now be useful." Rowan swallowed. "I didn't steal anything." Wolfe's voice was calm. "I did not say you did. I said you must be useful." Rowan glanced at me, then back to Wolfe. "Someone paid me to check something." Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Proceed." Rowan licked his lips. "They told me there was a document in a box. They described the box. They told me how to open the bottom." The muscles along my spine tightened. Wolfe's voice remained even. "Who told you?" Rowan hesitated. "A woman. She said she worked for Mr. Arnett." My eyebrows went up. Philip Arnett, the Foundation Committee member Clara had named. Wolfe did not react outwardly, but the air changed anyway, like a door had quietly closed somewhere. "And," Wolfe asked, "what did you do?" Rowan's eyes flicked again, involuntarily, toward the front of the house, as if even now he expected someone to burst in and claim him. "I went," he said. "I looked. I saw the box. I opened it. The letter was there." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "And you reported this?" Rowan nodded, misery in the motion. "I texted the woman, like she told me to." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "And then?" Rowan's mouth tightened. "Then, 2 days later, she told me to go back." "To take it?" I said. Rowan shook his head quickly. "No, she said someone else would handle that. She just wanted to know if it was still there. She said if I talked, I'd get blamed. She said she'd show my boss I'd stolen from clients." Wolfe's eyes held his. "Blackmail," he murmured, almost satisfied. "A web of small coercions." Rowan's voice cracked. "I didn't take it." "I believe you," I said, because I did. His fear had too much humiliation in it to be fake. Wolfe's gaze moved to me. "Archie. The name?" "Arnett," I said softly. "He's on Clara's committee." Wolfe's mouth compressed. "Yes." Rowan took a breath like a man surfacing. Am I in trouble?" Wolfe regarded him with calm disdain. "You are in trouble because you are alive and foolish. Whether you remain in trouble depends on whether you now do precisely what I say." Rowan stared. Wolfe's voice remained even. "You will write down the phone number you used. You will describe the woman. You will provide the text thread, and then you will remain in this house until I decide otherwise." Rowan's eyes widened. "I can't stay." Wolfe cut it off. "You can. If you leave, you will be punished by those who have already bruised your face." Rowan's hand went to his cheekbone instinctively, and my stomach tightened. That bruise hadn't been an accident. Wolfe's eyes never left him. "Now," Wolfe said, "tell me, when you were instructed, how did they know Miss Vane possessed such a letter?" Rowan swallowed hard. "I don't know." Wolfe leaned back a fraction. "Then we will discover it." And right then, from somewhere upstairs, came a faint sound. Soft, metallic, wrong. Not loud enough to be a crash. Not sharp enough to be a shout. Just a small, deliberate clink, like a spoon tapping glass in a room where no one was supposed to be. My head snapped toward the ceiling. Fritz appeared at the doorway almost immediately, his calm face altered by a single degree, the Fritz equivalent of alarm. "Herr Wolfe," he said quietly, "the orchid room door is open." The man who rang the bell that evening did it once, firmly, with the confidence of someone accustomed to doors opening. I answered it myself. He was middle-aged, well-groomed, dressed in a dark suit that cost more than my first car and fit like it had been negotiated clause by clause. His expression was courteous, alert, and entirely unsurprised to see me. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "I'm Leonard Hale." "Come in, Mr. Hale," I said. "You're expected." He stepped inside without hesitation, his eyes flicking once to the hall, once to the stairs, cataloguing exits the way men like him always do. He didn't ask where Wolfe was. He knew. In the office, Wolfe sat as he always did, a fixed point around which the rest of us arranged ourselves. Clara Vane sat stiffly to one side, hands folded in her lap. Rowan stood near my desk, pale but visible, exactly as Wolfe had instructed. Hale smiled politely. "Mr. Bray, Wolfe?" "Mr. Hale," Wolfe replied. "You represent Mr. Philip Arnett." "I do," Hale said. "In certain matters." "Sit," Wolfe said. Hale did. Comfortably. "You wish to speak," Hale said. "We are listening." "You are mistaken," Wolfe replied. "You wish to speak." I agreed to listen. Hale's smile tightened a fraction. "Very well. Miss Vane is considering a decision that would be unfortunate." "Unfortunate for whom?" Wolfe asked. Hale spread his hands. "For the Foundation, for its donors, for its reputation." Wolfe nodded. Reputations are fragile. They tend to shatter when struck with truth. Hale's eyes flicked briefly to Clara. "Truth is often a matter of perspective." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and perspective requires distance. You have none." Hale's jaw set. "You are in possession of incomplete information, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe's eyes were steady. "On the contrary, you are in possession of a letter." Hale smiled again. "You are well informed." "Not yet," Wolfe said. "But I will be." Hale leaned back slightly. "The letter is sensitive. Its existence alone is dangerous." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "which is why it was stolen." Hale's gaze flicked, quick, involuntary, to Rowan. Wolfe saw it. So did I. "Mr. Rowan," Wolfe said calmly, "has already been most informative." Hale's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped another notch. "Then you know," he said, "that the letter proves Miss Vane's involvement in a death." "No," Wolfe said. "It alleges it." Hale's voice hardened. "Written in her own hand." "Yes," Wolfe said. "At the behest of Jonas Rook." Hale's eyes narrowed. "You have no proof of that." "I do not require it," Wolfe said. "Because the letter was never intended as evidence. It was intended as misdirection." Hale let out a short laugh. "You expect us to believe—" "I expect nothing," Wolfe interrupted. "I will explain." He leaned forward a fraction, enough to command the room. "Evelyn Kestrel did not fall accidentally," Wolfe said. "Nor was she killed by Miss Vane. She was pushed." Clara inhaled sharply. "Pushed," Wolfe continued, "by a man who stood to lose everything if her financial disclosures became public. A man who had access, motive, and influence." Hale's lips thinned. "Speculation." "Philip Arnett," Wolfe said calmly, "was quietly restructuring Foundation assets at the time of Miss Kestrel's death. She discovered irregularities. She confronted him." Hale stood abruptly. "This is outrageous." "Sit," Wolfe said. Hale hesitated, then sat. "Jonas Rook," Wolfe went on, "was engaged to contain the damage. He persuaded a young, impressionable Clara Vane to write a letter falsely confessing culpability, promising it would protect the true killer." Clara's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "The letter was hidden," Wolfe said, "forgotten and believed lost, until Mr. Arnett sought a trusteeship and feared that Miss Vane's presence might revive old scrutiny." Hale's voice was tight. "You're constructing a fantasy." "No," Wolfe said. "I am concluding a pattern." He nodded to me. I stepped forward and placed an envelope on Wolfe's desk. Hale stared at it. "What is that?" "The letter," I said. Hale surged to his feet. "That's impossible." Wolfe's voice was calm. "Your courier was efficient but not imaginative. He assumed anonymity was protection." "It is not." Hale's mouth opened, then closed. "You see," Wolfe said, I never required you to bring the letter here. I required you to believe you still possessed leverage. He opened the envelope and removed the single sheet. This letter, Wolfe said, contains no physical evidence. It contradicts forensic findings. It names no accomplice. Its sole value is narrative, and narratives collapse under scrutiny. He looked at Clara. Madame, you were used. She nodded once, tears slipping free now. Wolfe turned back to Hale. Mr. Arnett will resign from the Foundation within 48 hours. He will issue a statement citing health. Hale's voice was barely audible. And if he refuses? Wolfe's eyes were cold. Then Inspector Kramer will receive copies of financial records, witness statements, and this letter, accompanied by an explanation that invites reconsideration of a 20-year-old death. Silence filled the room. Hale's shoulders sagged slightly. You have no jurisdiction. I have inevitability, Wolfe replied. Hale stared at the letter, then at Wolfe, then at the floor. You'll destroy him. No, Wolfe said. He did that himself. Hale straightened, composure returning in layers. You're certain? Yes, Wolfe said. And you will convey that certainty. Hale turned toward the door without another word. When it closed behind him, the house exhaled. Rowan slumped into the chair he'd been avoiding all evening. Clara covered her face with her hands. I looked at Wolfe. You could have had him arrested. Yes, Wolfe said. Eventually. But you didn't. No, Wolfe said. Justice delayed becomes spectacle. I prefer correction. He turned to Clara. You will withdraw your false confession, quietly. You will proceed with your appointment. She looked up, stunned. I can? Yes, Wolfe said. Truth has a way of resurfacing when no longer obstructed. She stood, steadier now. Thank you. Wolfe inclined his head. Do not thank me. Be more cautious with your loyalties. Inspector Kramer arrived later, as promised, close enough to be satisfied and far enough to be unnecessary. He listened, grunted, and took copies. That Arnett resigns, he said. Funny how that works. Efficiency, Wolfe replied. After everyone had gone, Clara, Rowan, the police, the brownstone returned to itself. Fritz served dinner. Wolfe ate with evident pleasure. As I leaned back at my desk, Wolfe said, Archie? Yes? People believe secrets are dangerous because they are hidden, he said. In fact, they are dangerous because someone wishes to keep them so. I nodded. Moral of the story? Wolfe lifted his fork. Never confess to a crime you did not commit. It invites men who have. I smiled. Outside, the city went on, pretending nothing had happened. Inside, the orchids slept undisturbed.